Interest rate benchmarks have always played and play a key role in financial market infrastructure. The ubiquitous nature of IBORs and the amount of financial products linked to LIBOR clearly define the magnitude and the relevance of this transition that comes with challenges and impacts all market participants. LIBOR and other interest benchmark rates have attracted headlines in recent years, mainly due to evidences of manipulation, but also due to the falling liquidity in their underlying markets. The problems affecting IBORs led to the first recommendations set by the Financial Stability Board in 2014. As a consequence, several countries established working groups and committees with the active support of market participants, regulators and central bank to redesign IBORs and create and adopt the new alternative risk-free rates. The goal was and is to isolate a rate that could better define the status of credit market, but also a rate that could be derived by actual transactions, unlike LIBOR that became more exposed to manipulation when it lost the link to real transactions. Since then, and thanks to the job done by those working groups and committees, we now have a nice set of new risk-free rates in place. Ester in the European Union, Sonia in the UK, Sauron in Switzerland, Tona in Japan and SOFR in the United States. All of those rates are overnight, but all of them depends on the activity of a different working group. There is a different administrator for each of those new rates, and some of those rates are derived from overnight secure transactions like Sauron and SOFR in Switzerland and the US. Others are derived from unsecured transactions. So the picture is quite different and articulated compared to the previous setup of LIBOR. Furthermore, all those new risk-free rates are overnight, derived from the transactions from the previous day. So those are backward-looking, unlike LIBOR, which is forward-looking and provides the market with term rates.
Yeah, so this seems quite a few things to track. So can you maybe tell us more about the challenges that companies face or will be facing in that transition?
This transition comes with challenges, there is no doubt. I would say that a successful transition depends on several variables and factors, but definitely we cannot neglect collaboration and timing. When it comes to collaboration, success is the result of a collaborative and concerted effort between public and private sectors. On one hand, the public sector, central banks, regulators and authorities should continue providing clear guidelines, instructions and roadmaps so that market participants can navigate easily through the challenge. On the private side, market participants should contribute actively to that process and stop issuing financial products linked to LIBOR and adopt the new risk-free rates and explain their clients the nature of the change and why they're doing this change. When it comes to timing, whilst the end of 2021 may appear far away from us and almost 2 years' time may appear enough to handle this transition, the reality is different and the amount of work to be put in place is enormous, and this requires appropriate planning and accurate activities to be put in place. And again on timing, a very clear message came this year in January from the FCA and the Bank of England. The intention is for the sterling LIBOR to cease existence by the end of 2021. No firm should plan otherwise. And if you look at the terminology and the wording that they used, this is a major step change and leaves us with no doubt about the future of LIBOR after 2021. So 2020 becomes a critical year for handling that transition. And this transition comes with challenges. It's not just moving from miles to kilometers, from one rate to the other. It's about redefining and redesigning the full ecosystem, the full infrastructure of your business. Beside the financial risks associated to the move from one rate to the other, economic, counterparty and valuation risks, there is a nice set of other areas of attention and intervention. Think about contracts and the extensive repapering exercise which is required. Think about the importance of adjusting fallback provisions, and financial institutions cannot avoid touching those provisions, because then they may be exposed to financial and legal risks. Think about hedge accounting and potential impact on that logic for corporates. And think about the IT, operational and process-related risks that needs to be managed when you move from one data set to other data sets. And these are just a few examples. So market participants should act now and plan appropriately to arrive prepared to the end of 2021. Refinitiv is committed to provide data, analytics, benchmarks to support market participants in a smooth transition from IBORs into new alternative risk-free rates.
So a lot of that is in fact content related. So I guess turning to Dave, I guess what do clients need to know about the data, the information, the change we need to do on that space?
And I think it's a good point, and sort of following on, a lot of firms already have programs in place and projects in place to move away from LIBOR and start the transition. I think it's important to recognise how large and complex a task this is. LIBOR is not only embedded in assets and liability structures for a given firm, but it's also embedded through applications and processes and infrastructures used for pricing and valuation, performance measurement, and risk management. So I think one of the key starting points is to build out that inventory of where your exposure lies, and that could be through understanding the content that you have and where LIBOR is an underlying, but also how you interact with your vendor, where you're actually sourcing the current LIBOR rates from. So I think it's key to kind of know and understand how you get LIBOR today and where it may flow through into your infrastructure. Secondly, as the market sort of starts to build, as Vince said, many of the alternative risk-free rates have now been recognised or recommended. It's obviously key to understand what those rates are, where you're going to actually source them from, and how you're going to embed them into your new applications. But also, as the markets build, we're starting to see liquidity grow in derivatives or new RFR products that are coming to market. And firms need to be able to price and value and sort of have risk measurement performances in place. So we're starting to see a lot of new instruments come to market. We're starting to see a lot of new OTC derivatives and interest rate swaps, basis swaps being priced, which is all content we have and provide through Eikon today. And that gives you the ability to build out curves that are needed to actually price those instruments. And I think thirdly, one of the areas to focus on and understand is actually what happens to that current universe of assets or instruments or securities that are currently referencing LIBOR today. Vince mentioned the importance of understanding fallback language. In some markets or some asset classes we may see a more standardized approach, but I think in other areas, for bonds for example, where LIBOR is embedded in a floating rate notes, terms and conditions and pricings, we may end up seeing that FRN or floating rate note may become a fixed rate bond when LIBOR goes away. So I think being able to identify and pull out within your inventory what that fallback language is and how that can be handled going forward as part of the transition.
Okay, thanks, Dave. And so you mentioned Eikon and the content flowing through Eikon. So I guess Alex, if you can say, a few words on how Eikon can help clients navigate this transition. What they can do with Eikon.
So most of the content that they spoke about is in Eikon. You can view it in Eikon. So we have done two things: is created a dedicated app, so it's very easy to find any information related to new risk-free rates. You simply type in IBOR and you will land on a main page where you have links to understand what's going on. So what Vince has just explained, so you have links to the central bank publications. And then you have dedicated tab per new risk-free rates. So you have one on SOFR, one on Sonia, one on Esther, and then on each of those tabs you will find the content that we have. So obviously you have the fixing, so you can get the quote. If you want to take that quote real-time, open it in Excel. You can also have the time series of that quote, the charting. We also have very decent data coming from interdealer brokers especially on basis swaps. On SOFR, typically we have basis swaps 3 months LIBOR against SOFR, We are starting to see new content on Esther, a bit less active than SOFR, but still we have pretty decent content. And on Sonia, it's a market that was there, so we have a lot more OIS content on Sonia already, as we add on Ionia, for instance, for Euro or Fed funds for USD. So that's one thing, it's the app, and what we are committed to is that we will update that app. So when new content coming from Dave, like swaptions, for instance, volatilities, we will put them on the app. So keep an eye on this app, IBOR app, put it in your favorites, and it will get updated with all new content that we have. The other things that we are doing is modifying the existing tools that people are used to, especially the search tools. So you have a Google type search. If you type in SOFR futures, you will find the futures in one click. If you type in SOFR basis swaps, you will find the basis swaps. So that's very easy. And we have advanced search, so Gov search, for instance, for the FRNs. So if you want to have a list of the FRNs denominated on SOFR, you would go into Gov search. And we have also IRD search, advanced IRD OTC search, to find what I was referring to before, like the OIS, interest rate swap, basis swaps, FRAs, and things that are coming next, like swaptions or caps floors, volatilities, for instance, directly in the search tool. And as Dave referred to, we have also created derived content from the data that we have, and that's really important for valuation and analytics. So we have a SOFR curve, we have an Esther curve, we have a Sonia curve. So it's all bootstrapped by us, by Refinitiv. The curves are also available on the IBOR app. And then you can use that curve to make your fair value calculations in the calculator. So swap pricer, you enter euro, you choose fixed flow OIS, you select Esther, you've got the Esther curve to discount your cash flows or calculate your forward 14 cash flows. Same on SOFR, same on Esther. It means that you can price, not only view the quote, but price a customized OTC basis swap SOFR against 3-month LIBOR, for instance, using our curve. So it's also very important to be fully transparent on the constituents that we use. So that's also something we put on our content, on our RICS page in Eikon. So you can find the curve, you can chart the curve, but also know what are the constituents that we've used, what are the analytics methods we've been using for bootstrapping and for interpolation. So it's all there. So Eikon is one way to view and get that data, but I think, Sam, can you tell us also where else you can find that data?
Sure, because you mentioned the analytics. So analytics is commingled, I would say, with the content and the workflow. So at the platform level, we adapting our pricing models to take into consideration the new instrument, the new reference rates. So for futures or interest rate swaps, for swaptions, so we need to adapt the library for that, and that will allow to enhance the pricing data. So like the curves you mentioned and the vol surfaces. And this pricing data can be accessed through APIs and globally, I would say, across Refinitiv. So from Eikon, from the content, either in real time or end of day. And this is the best way to ensure consistency of results of analytics across those workflows. And this is not just used internally, it's also made available to customers. So if they want to integrate our analytics, our curves, our surfaces, or even pricing swaps or options within their own enterprise workflow, they can do that with the API. In fact, so think of, as you mentioned, the valuation of a portfolio of loans, or having a look at the impact of the transition of a new curve on the forward cash flow of a bonds, or on the valuation. All those things could be done through APIs in the enterprise use case. And finally, I would say just yeah, on the platform, so we'll also providing support for like, tools or for other teams to develop new tools, like in Eikon you mentioned, or in content. So I guess, I don't know if you, Alex or Dave, maybe Alex on Eikon, if you have example of this new application or new tools that will be building to help clients transition.
So we are working on new tools and features that help customer transition to the new risk-free rate. So one big concern is for people who have, especially like think about corporate treasurers, they have book of existing swaps or loans on LIBOR. Yeah. So what we want to offer is that scenario analysis report into our risk management app called Marvel, where they can evaluate the impact of discounting, pricing with the new curves versus what they were doing with the LIBOR, because there is a financial impact to that. So that would be the form of a report that they can then share with their auditors, for instance, or with their counterparty on the red sales desks. The other thing we are working on is working with the central banks. So typically here in London, we've met with Bank of England, and they issued a recommendation to release a realized compounded rate calculator. So we are working on this. That will help calculate the cash flows on a given tenor, so standard tenors, but also on inputting your own start date and end date and calculate your realized compounded rate on that period. So for instance, to check what would be the cash flow you would pay on Sonia instead of paying it on LIBOR on a given period, forward period. So that's the tools we are working on. There are plenty of others we have in mind, especially when the data is coming, like swaptions, adapting our swaption calculator to price swaptions on new risk-free rates, same for caps floors, FRAs, loans. Everywhere we have a LIBOR exposure as an indexed benchmark or a curve, that will get replaced by the new curves and a new set of data that Dave is working on.
There's obviously a lot happening in the market data space. We continue to onboard new content as it becomes available, whether it's from the exchanges, so futures and options and the new risk-free rates, or continuing to work with interdealer brokers or with various sources to onboard new derivatives or new benchmarks themselves if and when they become available. In the reference data space, we're also doing a lot of work. I mentioned LIBOR fallback language, which is sort of becoming a key theme or a key topic and a challenge to actually identify that. We're introducing new fields into our data models and into our products, such as Datascope, that will make it easier to identify that fallback language and to be able to look across inventories to actually see what's within a fallback language, say, for example, within a prospectus. And in addition to that, there's new fields being introduced to actually capture the transition of bonds, for example, as and when they happen. So a bond can transition from LIBOR to a new risk-free rate, such as Sonia, which goes through a corporate action or a consent solicitation process. And we're introducing new fields into our products and our data models that will actually enable us to correctly capture that information and provide more detail to customers to actually understand how that flows through.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks, Alex and Vince, for your insights. And thanks, everyone, for watching us today. Please do look up at the Eikon IBOR app for more information.